Hello, my name is Sam Feltham, the Director of the Public Health Collaboration, and welcome to our 2021 virtual conference. It's been a difficult year to say the least, but I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to all of our ambassadors, members, patrons, and scientific advisory board members for all of your support through these difficult times. Without you, we would never be able to continue to better inform the public about the power of lifestyle to help create a better world. Now, before I let the next presenter speak, this conference is 100% free for all forever. However, if you find the content here today valuable, then please consider a £2 donation or whatever you can afford via www.phcuk.org/donate, or if you're in the UK, you can simply text PHC to 70660 to donate £2 directly from your phone, and of course texts are charged at your standard network rate. We hope you enjoy the conference from wherever you are in the world, and be sure to get involved in the civil conversation here on YouTube or by using the hashtag PHCVCon2021 on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for your support and be well.
Hi everyone, I'm going to take around 30 minutes to dispel 10 low-carb dietary myths, and please do email me if you have any questions. Myth number 1, low-carb starves the brain from essential glucose. It's stated that the brain requires 130 grams of glucose per day. Is this correct? If this is the case, then why do people report that they have more mental clarity and energy once they restrict carbohydrates to below 130 grams per day? This is a PET scan that shows that glucose is being used by the brain. But is the glucose the only fuel that the brain can use? First of all, let's explore where the 130 gram comes from. The dietary reference document published by the Institute of Medicine in 2005 states that the estimated average requirement for adults is 100 grams of carbohydrate per day. The recommended daily amount is then set by using a 30% coefficient of variation to cover the majority of the adult population. But also states the brain can adapt to a carbohydrate or energy restricted diet by utilizing keto acids as part of its fuel requirements. What are keto acids? They're a natural byproduct created when we burn fat for fuel. Ketones can supply 80% of the fuel for the brain, and the brain likes this fuel because it's clean energy. It doesn't cause reactive oxygen species that damage the brain. So the actual requirement for the brain of glucose is only 22 to 28 grams a day. Is it essential to obtain this from the diet? This would make carbohydrate or glucose an essential nutrient. What is an essential nutrient? It's a nutrient that we can't make, so therefore we have to eat it. This is a list of all the essential nutrients. Take a look. Carbs or glucose are not on the list. No, that's because we don't have to eat it, because we can make glucose out of protein or fat. For every 100 grams of protein we eat, we could make 56 grams of glucose. For every 100 grams of fat we eat, we could make 10 grams of glucose. So basically, a fried cooked breakfast could provide all the additional glucose we need for the brain. And it states in the document on page 275, the lower limit of dietary carbohydrate compatible with life apparently is 0, provided that adequate amounts of protein and fat are consumed. So this is a process called gluconeogenesis, which simply means the making of new glucose. And we can make up to 600 grams of glucose in a 24-hour period from fat and protein if we needed to. This is 24 times more than the brain needs. Myth number 2. Low carb results in eating more saturated fat that clogs the arteries. So first of all, does adopting a low carb dietary approach result in eating more saturated fat? Well, yes, it does in a way, because natural, healthy, real foods such as extra virgin olive oil, oily fish and nuts do contain saturated fat. The low carb lifestyle also supports cooking foods in natural stable fats that are not prone to oxidation, such as dripping lard and extra virgin olive oil. So the next question, does saturated fat clog the arteries and lead to cardiovascular disease? It's easy to see why people may think that. Saturated fat has been demonized for years, and it does look a bit like fatty plaques. However, dietary fat doesn't even go through the arteries. It's taken from the gut to via the lymphatic system to the fat tissue, the adipose tissue, where it's either stored or used for energy. Saturated fat circulating in the blood is more likely to come from the excessive consumption of dietary carbohydrate that's been converted to saturated fat by the process known as de novo lipogenesis, which means the production of new fat. We really aren't what we eat. Just think about how we fatten up cattle. We feed them grass or grain. We don't feed them fat to make them fat. What about the evidence base? Does eating saturated fat, has it been shown to cause cardiovascular disease? Now, we don't look at observational studies because they can't prove causation. So let's go to the best level of evidence, which is a Cochrane systematic review. The Hooper review on reduction of saturated fat for cardiovascular disease was updated just last year. It includes 15 randomized controlled trials, 159,000 participants. It demonstrates that reducing dietary saturated fat does not reduce mortality, but suggests that it would cut the relative risk of a cardiovascular disease event by 21%. However, this finding did become non-significant when only studies with a low risk of bias were included. Also, the review didn't demonstrate reducing dietary intake of saturated fat would reduce heart disease, strokes, or even diabetes. The most important take-home message from this review is on page 159, where the authors ran a sensitivity analysis for RCTs that did actually reduce saturated fat, excluding studies that aimed to reduce saturated fat but didn't. And then the only finding for cardiovascular disease events ceased to be significant. So basically, we should promote the message that the case should now be closed. If you're still not sure, we've researched saturated fat quite extensively. So you can read our position statement or watch the YouTube presentation from a previous PhD conference for more information. It is fantastic news that now there is a proposal that the current nutrient-based recommendations are replaced with food-based recommendations instead, and I really hope that this happens. But just a word of caution. When we talk about fueling from fat, we mean fueling from stored fat as well as dietary fat. It is best to obtain fat from real foods during meals rather than having large quantities of butter and or cream in coffee between meals. Most of us have plenty of energy stored as fat in our bodies that we should be able to dip into between eating episodes. For example, a 48 kilogram athlete with only 10 to 12% body fat still has 44,000 calories of stored body fat. A 70 kilogram woman with 25% body fat has 157,000 calories of stored body fat. And an obese woman with more than 50% body fat has 427,000 calories of stored body fat. Therefore, if you're fat adapted, meaning that your body can easily dip into your fat stores, you will not hit the wall and go into dietary starvation mode. Instead, you'll have enough stored energy to keep you going. Myth number 3. Low carb isn't evidence-based compared to the Eat Well Guide. The Eat Well Guide was launched in March 2016 and is full of evidence-free ideas. It encourages consumption of nutritionally poor foods rather than nutritionally rich foods. This is our Nutrition for Health model. Which guide do you think looks the healthiest? Public Health England published 5 sample daily meal plans alongside the Eat Well Guide, which are analysed and wasn't surprised to find them very high in carbs, more than 300 grams of carbs each day, and more than 100 grams of sugars each day too. The Look Ahead RCT tested the low-fat, high-carb diet in 5,145 patients and stopped early after 9.6 years because there was no reduction in cardiovascular disease. The Women's Health Initiative RCT included almost 49,000 individuals, postmenopausal women, and found that it did not reduce the risk of diabetes after 8.1 years. In comparison, carb restriction has been shown to improve diabetes and cardiovascular disease risk factors. So this myth is really easy to bust. Myth number 4, is low carb a high protein diet? And if so, does this protein damage the kidneys? So what is protein? It's building blocks of amino acids. Some are essential and some aren't. As all cells, tissues, and many hormones contain protein, eating protein that contains essential amino acids is important for growth, repair, and a wide range of metabolic processes that keep us healthy. And non-essential amino acids can be converted to glucose, so they don't go to waste. When we eat food containing protein, it's digested into amino acids. Any leftover amino acids are transported to the liver, where they're broken down to ammonia and then converted to urea. The urea is transported in the blood back to the kidneys, and the blood is filtered and the urea is passed out of the body in the urine. So basically, our kidneys act like a sieve to get rid of waste products. It's been demonstrated that there's no difference in kidney function between those who eat a high protein diet compared to those who eat a normal or low protein diet. The conclusion states that there's no evidence that high protein intake leads to a decline in renal function in healthy individuals, or even those populations with a greater risk of renal decline, such as those people with type 2 diabetes. So given the advantage of consuming protein to build muscle, lose weight, and maintain muscle with aging, this finding is really, really important. In fact, not eating enough protein is more detrimental to health. The protein leverage hypothesis suggests that we'll continue eating until our protein requirements have been met, no matter how many calories are consumed. And therefore, ultra-processed food that is lacking in protein is actually driving the obesity pandemic. It is known that protein increases satiety and low-carb real food meals reduce appetite. However, low carb tends to be moderate protein, not high protein. Total daily calories often reduce because people feel less hungry, so the percentage of calories coming from the protein may increase, but not necessarily the grams of protein eaten. Nephropathy is a known complication in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, where the kidneys become damaged and can no longer filter the blood as well, leading to protein escaping in the urine. Just because protein is found in the urine, does that mean that protein caused the damage? No, we have excellent evidence from the UK PDS studies that both hypoglycemia, high blood glucose, and hypertension, high blood pressure, causes the kidney damage. And a Cochrane systematic review has shown that restricting protein intake in diabetic renal disease is not effective. Whereas not only do low-carb diets treat the hypoglycemia, but also the hypertension, so much more likely to treat the true cause of the kidney disease. Myth number 5. It is true that low carb results in fewer eating episodes, but is skipping meals bad for your metabolism? People only go into dietary starvation mode, which results in the body slowing down when there are insufficient calories for the body to use. We've already seen that even lean people have plenty of stored fat in their body. If people are able to access their fat stores for energy, which is only possible when insulin levels are low, their body will obtain all the energy it needs and doesn't need to conserve calories by reducing the metabolic rate. The hormone cortisol peaks first thing in the morning, whether you eat or not. So why is this important? The cortisol tells the body to release energy, and this boosts metabolism. So we don't have to eat to actually boost our metabolism in the morning. And research has also shown that extending the overnight fast does not cause compensatory eating later on in the day. It's important to note that you cannot burn fat and store fat at the same time. So eating carb-containing meals and snacks repeatedly throughout the day raises insulin and puts you into fat storage mode. So the only time this person can burn fat is when they're sleeping, and that's shown here with this green section. Eating 2 meals a day has been shown to be beneficial for people with type 2 diabetes because there's so much more time when they're in fat burning mode, and this can be shown here. Myth number 6. Low carb is expensive and unaffordable. If you eat less often, don't snack, don't eat junk food, and have more nutrients per calorie, is that really expensive? Karen, a dietitian in New Zealand, compared 3 meals and 3 snacks for low carb with low fat and found that low carb to be only very slightly more expensive, around £1.14 a day, which for many is worth it due to the increase in quality of life and perhaps work productivity. But an important note is when you take into consideration the reduced frequency of eating, this additional cost is probably wiped out. This is certainly my own personal experience and the experience of many people I've talked to. Myth number 7. Will low carb lead to nutritional deficiencies? Really? Do you really think that these types of meal will lead to nutritional deficiencies compared to ultra-processed food? I analysed a typical low-carb plan over 3 meals. and a typical low-fat plan over 5 to 6 eating episodes. Neither diets contained a lot of ultra-processed food. As you'd expect, there was a big differences between the carbs and the fat, opposites. But there wasn't real differences between the diets for protein or fibre. Interestingly, the low-fat diet was deficient in vitamin D, iron, calcium, and zinc. I know we don't meet our nutrients every day, but there was no deficiencies with the low-carb diet. And there is published evidence that indeed consuming a well-balanced low-carb diet can provide you with all the nutrients you need. Myth number 8, a low-carb dietary approach isn't suitable for many conditions. Clearly, one size doesn't fit all, but some level of carbohydrate restriction has been shown to be effective for a whole host of conditions, and probably more besides. I think the safety essentials are to provide education and medication review and ongoing support. Myth number 9, it's not sustainable. A while back, I reached out to members of the Low Carb Forum on diabetes.co.uk to ask this very question, and I got 21 responses. Everyone thought it was sustainable and intended to stay on it. Basically, it's when the benefits outweigh the costs. These people achieved improved glycemic control and weight loss. No one increased medication, and they all felt so much healthier. Isn't that a great motivator to stick to it? Myth number 10, we'll finish with the poo. Is a low-carb dietary approach lacking in fibre, and will it eliminate the good bugs in the gut? There are many strategies that can help you keep regular with passing stools, such as fibre, hydration, movement, magnesium, and even dietary fat. It's wrong to say that a low-carb diet is lacking in fibre, as there's plenty of options. The green traffic light coding here shows that many high-fibre foods are also low-carb. And the foods that promote a healthy gut microbiota are the very foods that we encourage on a low-carb diet, whereas the processed food that damages the gut microbiota are eliminated. So, 10 myths busted, hopefully leading to more confidence in the promotion of low-carb dietary approaches. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found it interesting. Once again, email me with any queries. Thank you.